was watching a video by Shoe on Head, um, which made
Uh,
me think.
wait. Is she Canadian? Can I ask?
I don't believe so. She strikes me as like a proper Californian,
Because I know she used
but
to date that Canadian YouTuber, the Armored Skeptic.
mm, the I'm, I feel like they're all dating each other. Like left YouTube is just one big polycule. Um, but
Me and Pascal
forget
have to get invited to that.
that. Just wait. Like talk to Jason because I bet he's all over that. But I think that what she had to say was interesting. She linked together the male loneliness epidemic, which is a real thing, very distressing development, especially for, frankly, men our age, right? The median number of close friends. Is it median or is it modal? Right, the average number of close friends for especially a white American man, between the ages of 35 and 50 is zero. And the with younger men, that's also compounded by increased rates of, you know, but I don't want to say involuntary celibacy, but involuntary celibacy. Um, and tied that to the rise of these apps that promise AI companionship. Now, what we see is a two-sided phenomenon. There's a social development and then a technological adaptation, one which is only contemplated because there's a profit potential behind it, right? The think about how much it costs somebody to date or marry, and if you could get a fraction of that through subscription fees for your idealized AI girlfriend, then that's an extremely lucrative um, business line. And it made me think, what's what are the crises in our geopolitics and our political economy right now? What are the technologies that are developing or available, and how might they be applied to those problems by the people who have the resources? I'm not implying that this is necessarily going to be a positive adaptation, right? Because ultimately the technology is deployed in ways determined by the people who control the technology. But when we look at geopolitical developments or analyze political economic conditions, we tend to do so without um, taking into account how adopting new technologies might shift the basis of the problem, how solutions or developments, changes in the technological realm feed back onto political, economic, social problems. So I thought that um, we could go through some of the big um, hotspots, flashpoints, structural crises, and look at what the potential is for the actors that are relevant to try to develop technical solutions rather than finding political settlements or addressing serious material conditions. For instance, the when you look at both the Gaza attack and by Hamas, the attack coming out of Gaza, and the Israeli response, these are deeply shaped by the technology that Israel deployed in creating the wall around Gaza, the way that they structured their defense based on the promises of this technology. Hamas responds by, like the Houthis and like many other insurgent groups around the world, by taking technology developed elsewhere, commercialized, spread through um, the international supply chains, drones that you can buy on Alibaba, and deploying them in new ways to provide solutions for the challenges posed by Israeli security. Now, we can start there, or with some of the responses to the um, Gaza conflict. For instance, the Houthi the blockade of the Red Sea for Western shipping, right? For countries that are aligned with Israel in the conflict over Gaza. For instance, Chinese flagged ships can just pass right on through. That is possible because of an adaptation of new forms of warfare by the Houthi, like drone swarms. Um, and the response might also be a technological one. It's long been a dream of the Emiratis, not just the Emiratis, but Americans as well, to develop a land link from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, which would make the Red Sea route extraneous. Now, as long as the Red Sea route was open and the Panama Canal was available, then there was no interest in the type of infrastructure investments necessary to build um, relevant scale road or rail solution going from the oil regions of Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, um, the GCC countries in general, to the Mediterranean coast. It's also something that you can't do without Israel. Um, the alternative would be to try to go through Syria. Obvious problems with that, and so you have a geopolitical conflict creating an economic bottleneck, and the solution, rather than resolving the underlying political issue, might be this technical patch, create a land route through Saudi Arabia and up through Jordan and Israel in order to make up for the loss of the Red Sea and the Panama and the Suez Canal. In some ways, China and their Belt and Road Initiative, creating a Eurasian land route, has been very prescient. The world system up through this current moment has been based on American control of major shipping lanes and open seas for the bulk movement of goods. That was taken for granted, and alternative avenues for movement of freight fell away. But now here's a problem, and it might lead to a new series of investments, ones which actually might dovetail into some of the bigger utopian projects coming out of the GCC. For instance, NELM. The concept was always that NELM would be linked by rail to the other centers of Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula. And now, apart from the kind of fever.
I'm sorry, Kuba. What is NELM?
Oh, NELM is the um,
It's a giant, stupid mega project where they're going to make a giant city in the middle of the desert that is a line.
Yes, a wall.
It's just a giant wall that's really, really long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's some kind of it's basically a mega project, a mega construction project to build a new type of city. It's not very well thought out, but things don't have to be well thought out in the Gulf. You just need to be able to hold a Gulf dictator's attention for 15 minutes with the right PowerPoint, and then you'll get billions to build this thing. But NELM was this big construction project, a new modern city in the desert that is constructed as a line.
Is it green?
Beyond modern.
Is it green?
Yes, it's supposed to be green.
It's probably not
There,
very green.
well, the concept is that it will be powered by hydrogen and solar.
Pascal, do you know about Nelm? Gnome?
I've seen videos of it.
What do you think?
At this point,
I'm sorry.
At this point, it's entirely they haven't
broken ground.
Nobody's moved in. It's still at the concept.
You know how the Gulf they have these little flashy little ads they do for all the little things they have to plan. A few fake islands they're going to create to, have people go visit.
Is it more of a resort thing, or is it
no, it's a city. It's supposed to be a city.
But for well-to-do people, like get away from the dying world.
There's a bunch of these giant projects that they're doing, not just in the Gulf. For example, the Egyptians are building this huge administrative capital outside of Cairo. The Nome is not the only mega project that's going on in the Gulf. There's one. I can't keep up with all the mega projects. I'm sure Kuba knows better than me. But Nome is one of these big gargantuan projects that's being talked about, but has yet to be executed upon. Some of these projects get half done and abandoned. Even in Dubai, I think there was supposed to be that World Islands thing.
Yeah.
That never.
They gave up on that one.
But Neom, I think, will probably end up in that direction. But to speak to Kuba's point about technological solutions, I think that's kind of an interesting one. Whether you can get a technological fix, a band-aid fix, as it were, that can keep things chugging along with the same structural problems, and what are the unforeseen consequences of those transformations. When Kuba started, he was talking about the epidemic of male loneliness, which obviously we might link to, the end of Fordism, the breakdown of neoliberalism, and then obviously there is profit opportunities in that loneliness. And then what happens? You have all these apps that are perhaps addictive, or they play psychological tricks on people, and that reinforces in a kind of vicious cycle, that cycle of loneliness. So it doesn't resolve the problem, but kind of masks that problem with a band-aid solution. But how long is an AI girlfriend going to be able to keep someone happy? I don't really know about it, but it does seem to speak to the loneliness point. It kind of makes sense. If we look in the context of an atomizing society, we now have all these sex apps that people use anyway, right? And it's promoting a culture in which relations are disposable, right?
I feel offended you're talking shit about me.
It's okay, Jason Myles, but in a society, in a society which is atomizing, and where you have to move around and things like that, that kind of relationship is going to be the one that is viable, because if you can't settle down with somebody, you just get back on the dick carousel.
It's funny speaking of the dick carousel. It's funny you say that, because I do live about an hour away from a legal red light district, and there's a few people that I've met down here that live in that area, literally within the red light district, that are older than me, or some people even younger than me, that have no problem going there on the weekends and not on the weekends, and in talking to them and kind of just thinking and talking to other men around my age that are single or newly single, there is kind of when we say incel, I think everybody thinks the kid that shot up those people in Santa Barbara, I can't think of his name right now, the ultimate gentleman. And no one really thinks of like 40 to 50-year-old men that also are in, similar quote unquote loneliness predicaments. So many people I've met not from California that have moved down here and frequent the red light quite a bit. You know, it's never not busy when I go even around that area.
Well, it's because relationships are increasingly being presented as transactional.
Very much so.
And so, is it really that much of a leap if relationships are increasingly being shown as transactional to just say, well, let's just make it a straight up transaction? Why dance around why pretend that it's not just a straight transaction for sex? Cut out the extra steps, as it were. Because
frankly, until you had the notion of first romantic and then bourgeois marriage, then it was a question of, is it going to be a market transaction or is it going to be a quasi-feudal property transfer from father to husband?
Well, I would point out here, I do see the parallel you're driving at, Kuba, but in the context of the pre-modern world, those marriages were very often within a kind of communal context. So it's not even just about one person marrying like another person between two nuclear families, right? We're talking about like societies where you don't really have the concept of bourgeois individualism. So obviously, historically, marriage has always been, has always had that kind of element to it. But I think there is something a little bit different between the kind of straight up commercialization of the modern era. I don't know. Would you agree with that, Kuba?
I think that I agree that it's different than the straight up commercialization of the modern era, and in a materialist Marxist way, you can trace it by changes in the underlying economic structure of society. When you have familial organization, either through feudalism or through clan structures or embedded in village life, depending on the particular flavor and the particular class location, you have some position in that overall hierarchical system. You're somewhere in it, and marriage is just another manifestation of that. It's often it's an arranged marriage by parents, or in some cases, right, like another authority figure will just tell you what to do, even if the impetus for the pairing comes from the couple itself. You'll need approval, right? There's the lingering tradition of men asking women's fathers for their blessing or permission to woo or wed their daughters, right? And then the purely commercial transaction, right, that goes along with sex work, that's something that accompanies a shift to a commercial society. That's possible under conditions of urbanization, the atomization of individuals from outside, getting pulled out of those collective groups, whether familial or class or village based, and then being able to make those individual level decisions, both the male and the female side. And now, right, there's been another change where, especially during COVID, you had much fewer opportunities for interpersonal contact, fear of contagion, and the technologically mediated type of relationship, whether it's transactional or not, begins to replace cohabitation or interpersonal contact. And if you think about it, right, the difference between a girl friend that you make on a dating site or because you're on the same World of Warcraft guild, whatever internet mediated contact you have, and you only see somebody through a screen and you only exchange messages, talk on the phone, maybe. And getting to the point where you meet in person is kind of a big deal. Well, until you get to that point, functionally, an AI that can simulate human relationship through texts, chatting, now they do voice and everything. Well, how far away is that from your experience with a real person, especially as the AI gets better and better? Also, I think it dovetails. I don't want to be, I don't want to sort of myopically fixate on the kind of Davos, Klaus Schwab depopulation agenda. But within that world, the most optimistic take on wither humanity is that right now we've got a serious climate crisis as well as a migration crisis, all kinds of different crises happening. But there are also certain trends that go along with development, and there is development taking place in all across the world. The idea being that as a society becomes more developed, population growth diminishes and then ultimately reverses. And that's a peaceful way to try to do a degrowth, right? Get everybody up to the point where they're rich and miserable like Westerners or South Koreans. Then they'll stop having kids. And then we can ease some of the pressure that goes along with having a population of 8 billion on the planet, be it climate pressure or pressure on resources or even social pressure. That degrowth trajectory would, and that not degrowth, depopulation. It is very, very different agendas. But like after the plague, the survivors found that their labor commanded a much greater wage just because of its scarcity. If you get to a point where the population is diminishing and the people left are largely old, then that will create more opportunities for the young. So we just need to get through this bottleneck where all of this bad stuff is happening, and then basically not solve the family problem, not solve the the loneliness problem. Apologies. In a way that leads to more relationships, but in a way that's palliative, right? That
but the issue with I mean, I think one of the things that I'm noticing now, perhaps, and maybe I'm wrong about this. I'd like to hear what like Pascal and Jason have to say about this. But you know, we live in a society where you have an enormous amount of economic insecurity and a labor force that is increasingly told to be flexible. And even if you're wealthy, you could be commanding a good salary. You know, you can't count on commanding that good salary because you could lose your job in the latest round of cuts in tech or what have you. So even wealthy people feel insecure. And, you know, whereas in the Fordist era, there was an incentive to have a family. You know, like you had the social reproduction. Having a family unit was like a viable building block of the Fordist system. It seems that the male loneliness issue is a product of the fact that, you know, now you can't afford to have those relations. You have to be mobile, like you said. You have to be able to get the heck out of wherever, wherever you need to get your job, you'll go to. And if you're permanently on the move looking for jobs, you don't make friends. If you're not in a workplace together for an extended period of time, you don't build those relationships. and we've already discussed this before, Kuba, we live in an age where civil society is in massive decline as well. So people in this like neoliberal era are atomized by the very the very political economy of the system. It creates this loneliness, but it also creates those opportunities for people to make money off that loneliness, whether it's through the sex apps and the dick carousel or through this emergent system of AI. Now, I do wonder whether AI really will be that successful, because one of the interesting things in video games recently is the failure of what is it called, the new Skyrim, the space Skyrim. My name is blanking on the game at the moment. Needless to say, it's a huge exploring game, but it's procedurally generated, and people lost interest in the game once they realized the trick was procedurally generated, if that makes sense. So even if functionally, the relationship with the AI is indistinguishable, uh, sense from a religion, once the curtain has been lifted, that this is just a mindless machine spouting back an algorithm to you, I don't know if it's really going to resolve that issue. I think it'll all just, as you say, probably just feed into the further atomization of society, but I don't know.
Pascal,
Well,
you want
I
to add to
think
that? You guys, let's let Pascal add that.
I don't particularly see how the technology is going to provide a full satisfaction in terms of resolving the issue of the emotional kind of gap that's going to be caused by these types of contradictions that we have within our society. I think that what's going to be needed is going to be some type of really social reflection as to what the definitions of the function of our society really is in this kind of post technological world where so much is in flux, because people are talking about, male loneliness. Well, what about women? Are women feeling fulfilled particularly right now? Are women feeling particularly jazzy and wonderful? Is everything okay with them? I think that actually the notion that we're living in a society where anyone is particularly feeling fulfilled is pretty incorrect prognostication. I mean, I understand the dangers with the whole phenomenon of focusing on incels and everything else, but rates of suicide amongst young women have been going up as well as young men. There's a whole range of problems that we have in our society that I don't think this quick fix technological outlook is going to answer.